Hey guys, today we're here to talk about our newest creation, something we call the Revival 6. I'm Alan.
And I'm Stefan, and this is the 6. What do you know about this bike?
So in about 12 hours, we were delivering this motorcycle to its proud owner at the Haas Gallery, which is a new motorcycle museum in Dallas, Texas.
But before we deliver it, we kind of have a thing on our bikes that they all need to work. And as this bike is not even remotely street legal, we needed a place to test it. And fortunately, we were able to come out to Circuit of the Americas to do our testing again.
And we did. You see a lot of bikes that have some avant-garde new ideas in design, but very few of them really perform and run on the track or anywhere really, even at any sort of street speed. So it was important to us to build this bike that was partially inspired by a motorcycle called the Majestic, and partially just out of the brains of Stefan and the entire team at Revival. We started with that first seed and went from there. The first engine that came to mind for some weird reason was the Honda 6-cylinder that came in the CBX 1000 6-cylinder.
And that, from a design standpoint, that engine kind of worked well for this concept because the engine itself is so wide. And in order to get a reasonable kind of front steering lock angle, you need to have your swing arm kind of wide. So if you pair that wide swing arm with a wide engine, it doesn't look quite as awkward as it would on, like, you know, if you tried to do a single-sided hub-centric steering on a single-cylinder engine, it would kind of just look bizarre with this big lump sticking out in the front swing arm. But this makes it kind of all jive.
So the overall design concept was obviously centered upon doing what you call hub center steering. If you can't tell, it's got 2 swing arms, this bike. We'll kind of get into the detail of that in a minute, but that central design concept with the front swing arm being attached directly to the engine, as the engine is a stress member, and most of the frame for this bike kind of set the course. From there, we knew that we wanted kind of a lower, long look. We found these tires, which you know, I have to admit I kind of picked because I like the color of them. They're an old school clincher tire on a 28-inch wheel. It kind of set, like, with that tire and that large of a wheel in mind, it gave us the proportions we were looking for. So that little bitty motor, the giant 6-cylinder, didn't look so big anymore proportionally to the tires. And from there, Stefan could create the room to kind of build the chassis. So for what, 6 months or so, this existed only in CAD? Was it 6 months?
It was about that. We spent a lot of time, and it takes a team to build a bike like this. And while I get my name attached to a lot of this stuff from the design standpoint, there's actually a ton of guys that worked on this. I spent most of my effort up on the front hub and the front steering, but then for the whole back half of the bike, Chris Auerbach, one of the other engineers at the shop, put just tons of hours and did a fantastic job there. And there's a few other interesting things to note, like this is 2 different drive chains, and we have a gear reduction in the middle of it and an inboard brake. So that allowed us to keep the whole back swing arm and rear hub really sort of small and clean, so you don't see any brake calipers or any mess back there. And it also, by moving the rear brake rotor up to the jack shaft, you actually get a torque multiplication. You get that same gear ratio of your final drive magnified onto the brake. So the brake is spinning faster, but it has more torque to deliver to the rear wheel. And as that's the only brake on the bike, it needed to work well, and it turns out it does.
Did you catch all that? There's going to be a quiz later. Wait till he gets into the discussion about how the front hub is made. So let's talk about the standard motorcycle, standard forks, as compared to how this works. Monastically spaced, grounding.
Right. So telescopic fork is the conventional design. We're all familiar with it, but there's some issues with the geometry when you use a telescopic fork, because as it compresses the suspension, the trail changes, and that changes how the bike handles, and that means that you end up generally having to carry more trail at certain parts of the suspension range than you would necessarily want to, because you're accounting for the complete compressed trail number. With a hub-centric design, you can actually set it up to do whatever you want. You can set up the steering geometry to be exactly what you want. And this one has consistent trail all the way through the range of motion and all the way through the steering angles. So the steering kind of feedback and behavior doesn't change no matter what the suspension's doing.
So we've just ridden this bike at COTA on the back straight and in through a few corners and gotten a feel for it. And I have to say, it's completely dead straight, completely solid. Even on the back straight, believe it or not, there's quite a bit of bumps and dips back there. It felt completely steady and totally straight. Yeah, at speed on a standard conventional fork bike, what he's essentially saying is the steering changes as the suspension compresses on the front end. And the way we've designed this is hopefully that's not happening.
Right.
Yeah. Not only that, I wanted you to talk a bit about the internals of this. There's a video that shows how this is put together from CAD. But I wanted you to talk about what's inside of this and why it's adjustable and what makes it super unique.
Right. So I haven't seen this exact type of steering mechanism tried before. And maybe somebody has, but I haven't seen it. This one, all the suspension loads are actually carried through the primary swing arm, and then these two lower arms, that is only controlling the steering axis angle and then also the wheel steered angle. We can all come up with different terminology for that, but these two control arms are doing two jobs. In a lot of the hub-centric designs, you'll have one control arm that sets the steering axis and then another control arm that's setting the steering angle. And by developing this kind of as a sort of an unusual 3D 4-bar linkage, so it's 4 bars in 2 different directions, we're able to define what that steering axis is and what the steering angle is with just 2 control arms.
It's worth mentioning that all of this was done, conceived, designed, drawn, and machined in-house.
Yeah, machined, fabricated. So we can see a lot of what's here, the parts that we did, but what we don't see is all the jigs and the fixtures. Like to make these swing arms, because it's such a precise thing, we had to spend a ton of time making fixtures for that.
Just to make this straight aluminum tubing bend to the appropriate angle. So when I say in-house, I mean at Revival, at our workshop. The only thing we didn't do was the powder coating. Straight up, the leather work, all the machine work and all the tubing was all done in-house. That's the part I think I'm the most proud of, is that we managed to accomplish this without having to bring in other experts.
Right.
So
there's a ton of cool stuff on this. I mean, we've kind of talked about the front end and the back end and sort of like the obviously different things, but there's some weird stuff even going on just with like the handlebars. So you notice the clutch is actually operated like a twist grip on as a throttle, and obviously the throttle works like a throttle, and they're both internal, so there's nothing up here, but it still has all the controls that you need to
I found it actually easier to shift than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
it was actually quite simple.
I was really surprised at how well the clutch modulation works.
Straight,
yeah,
super easy. And I'll say this, it's real fucking loud. It's really fucking, everybody filming around is like, quit revving the bike, right?
Yeah.
The shifting, obviously this is a stainless shifter with a brass knob. All this was machined and made. Chris Auerbach made this, right? Yeah, this piece is all made here. All these were spun. We made these for these carburetors, these velocity stacks.
Down to the foot pegs, the rear sets, all this stuff. Andy did this aluminum panel just to kind of clean up the back of the engine.
There's a lot to discuss here. Go ahead and talk about a little bit about the suspension pieces.
Right, so when we were riding this thing and testing it, like the way the suspension felt was pretty incredible. And it's a somewhat conventional rear suspension. You know, you got a push rod and a bell crank and down to a shock.
Conventional, there's nothing conventional about this.
Right, but I mean, you see linkage,
engineering talk, it's,
you see linkage suspension in the back, but it's not that common that you see linkage suspension in the front.
Right.
And so we've got kind of a mirrored, semi-symmetric type of suspension, which was mostly done for aesthetic reasons. But one of the cool parts is that this is actually a real carbon fiber rod, and it is very much a stressed member. This is not just a sticker on top of something else. And when you hold those, I was shocked at how light they are. Even with the aluminum ends, they weigh nothing.
We machined these aluminum ends, obviously, and epoxied the carbon fiber tubing into the aluminum ends, and they weigh like, it felt like a quarter of a pound, like less than that, those pieces.
Yeah, that kind of joke about where you go and pick something off the bench and throw it across the room because it's just so much lighter than you thought it would be.
So, the details of the suspension, Uhlens, not Öhlins, Uhlens, shocks and springs.
Where are you from?
Germany, Sweden.
Well, I'm from America. It's Öhlins.
It's Öhlins, okay.
Anyway, yeah, I think that was a big part of why the suspension felt so good is these shocks are incredible, but it also really helps that Auerbach did a great job working out the kinematic ratios and making sure that this stuff was done right.
It's not simple math, guys. You don't just make a bracket and make it look good. There are guys that are building custom motorcycles that look good sitting down and sitting still, but they don't really work, and the math hasn't been done there. I'm not saying all motorcycles and all custom motorcycles. We've just seen a lot of bikes that have a similar feel, but they're just not the same. There's two talented engineers that spent a lot of time making sure that everything on this bike works. And I gotta say, I had full confidence. But when I rode it, I was really surprised at how freaking good it was.
Yeah, same for me.
You even.
Oh yeah, no,
we do
the math and we think we know what we're doing, and you know, you can have your ideas about it, but if you don't actually build it and test it, you kind of don't really know. And today was finding out for real that, yeah, no, all of our math was right. The chassis was stable. I wanted to go faster. I wanted more time. I wanted to be able to kind of push it a bit, but we're on a deadline. This has to go to the gallery tomorrow. Yeah.
All I was thinking was, if we happened to crash it today, what would the gallery owner, Mr. Haas, say if we said, you know what, we can't deliver tomorrow? But we got through it. Even this is something I'm really proud. We've never branded a bike that we've ever built. We've never put a real logo. We've done like a diamond, some subtle things, but that, I'm excited that it's there.
Wait, didn't we brand the other one for Bobby?
Nope.
And the valve cover.
Yeah, but nothing said Revival.
This
actually says Revival on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about this. Talk about the ignition a little bit.
So that's one thing. You notice this has these crazy orange spark plug wires on it. So this is not the original kit that came with the CBX. We switched for two reasons. One, the ignition system that came with the bike is old and I don't trust them, and it's too easy for those little CDIs to go weird, and we just wanted to get our hands on something that we knew we could trust, and that was a C5. They happened to make a C5 ignition for the CBX, so it was a direct plug and play, and then it also had this really trick coil that was an easier package and just kind of interesting. Without getting way deep into the details of what's going on with that coil, just know that it's kind of cool. The real neat part about the C5 is it's optically triggered.
Yep.
So the
I was
ignition
waiting for
timing,
the optically triggered.
Yeah, the ignition timing is exactly right. It's really easy to install. They make them for a bunch of different bikes, and in my opinion, you can't get a better ignition system in the aftermarket right now. For what we do, it's just the best thing we got.
It runs so good. I don't think we've ever built a bike where we didn't, especially with 6 carburetors, where we just fired it up and it ran fine without a single burble.
Is everyone ready? To their credit, Doc and Chris did a bit of research and figured out their best guess for what jetting needed to be with the open intakes and the open exhaust. And riding it today, I think they nailed it. Absolutely nailed it.
Totally perfect. Hopefully the sound stuff comes out really well, because the sound recording, the way this thing runs, is incredible.
But dude, you know as well as I do, there is no substitute for hearing this in person, and it might be the last thing you hear, but it doesn't count. It doesn't carry through on video.
Well, I'm really damn proud of it. I think it looks really good. I think it's worth noting that the bike is a little bit wobbly right now. We're on a pretty substantial hill. Turn 1 at Circuit of the Americas. If you can't tell, there's a giant elevation drop, and we're on a pretty serious angle. Yeah. So Stefan was worried the bike was going to fall over. It's on its stand, but it's pretty safe.
That's why I haven't really moved very far from here.
You might come around here, and let me push this around, Corona. One of the things that's really cool to look at from this angle, well, you can do whatever you want. You can move it around. One of the things that's really cool to look at is just how this suspension and how the turning really works. So as you push into it, I can't even. Oh, we're on the stand. Sorry. Yeah. As you turn the wheel, like nothing, it looks like magic, and it's actually cable driven. Stefan's designed this system where we've got tension from both ends, and it's pulling the steering. And it's really almost too little effort when I was out there.
Yeah.
It was so easy. I don't know what math is involved there, but the ratio is right enough that you don't even feel. Right?
Yeah, and I did some working out to make sure that the wheel angle changes at the same rate that the bar angle changes, so everything feels pretty natural. Honestly, cable-driven steering is never going to catch on. It is not a viable thing for production. There's no technical advantage to it. That was a selection because it was the most efficient way for us to get control of the front wheel. If we were going into production, we'd probably come up with something a bit different.
Visually, it just looks better.
Exactly.
Because everything pulls back instead of straight down.
It's that compromise for the performance versus form. Kind of, we were a little bit more on the form side for that, but it's enough performance to work.
It's illusion. It creates a complete illusion, and I was against it. I have to admit, when you talked about doing it, I thought it was kind of a crazy idea to make it driven by cable, but it works really, really well. Well, I'm proud of it. Thanks guys for watching. Hopefully you go to the Haas Gallery and see this thing in person. It will not be at the Handbuilt Show this year, but next year, 2019, we'll have this on display at the Handbuilt Show. If you want to see it between now and then, you got to go to Dallas. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, follow, comment. Tell us if you hate it. Tell us if you love it. Anything's good. Thanks for watching.